Welcome to the second season of Two Robs and a Mike, brought to you by Summit Gear, your trail running store in the Blue Mountains. Hey, Rob, how was your holiday, Christmas, New Year?
Christmas, yeah, it's been pretty busy, very family focused and family oriented. It was good, and you know, managed to keep training, so that's good.
Yeah, That's well, it's always a temptation, right? Is to get too involved in the festivities and forget about the training.
Yeah,
Yeah. No, likewise, I managed to keep training. Um, Everyone that was watching last year would know that I was sort of managing a bit of a knee injury, and that continued for into the new year, but is starting to feel like it's coming back to normal.
good.
So
That's great.
that's my big news, is that I feel like I've been doing some strength training, one-legged strength training to make sure I'm using my left knee, and is starting to feel a lot more solid and more stable, might be the right word. So I'm looking forward to what 2025 brings now. Training for 6 foot. How's your training going?
Yeah, it's going all right. It's still probably not where I'd like it to be, and my fitness is still not where I'd like it to be. But we talked late last year about I was going to do a 12-week block of math training.
Yep.
And then I gave a bit of a explanation about what that is and that. So I did talk about, we did the formula, and for where I'm at and my age and all of that, it would have set me around 120.
Yes.
But I thought that was probably a little bit too low. So I did some testing of that, and the main testing that I used, which is not really scientific, but it seems to work, and a lot of experts and researchers use it, is the nose breathing.
Yes.
So to get to the top of zone 2. So if I can't run with my mouth closed, and obviously if you've got a cold or blocked sinuses, doesn't work.
Yeah.
But
Can't run at all.
as much. But that is not the case for me. So I've been using that besides the treadmill and the sort of the tempo run. I've mainly been using the nose breathing to see where I'm at, and sort of was what I was expecting. I'm now using 140,
Right.
so it was actually 20 beats a minute faster than what the math formula would have suggested. But I thought that no, I would have been better than 120, and it's proven that around about that 140, I can go to 145. Still, not really clenching my mouth to keep it closed. And similar to nose breathing is when you can just have a conversation like this. If I can run along and I'm just having long sentences or whole paragraphs of conversation, then that's fairly equivalent to still being in zone 2. So I've been doing that. The only downfall for me in this block of math training, coming from a low base of fitness, is I don't have the strength and the speed to maintain that 140 beats a minute when I'm going downhill.
Right.
So one of the things with it was that you don't, you might, if it's going up really steep and you've really been pushing, you might have to back it off and walk or a really slow jog just to keep under the 140 heart rate. But going down the other side of a hill or a mountain pass, depending on how steep that road is or trail is, your heart rate can come right down. And for me to try and stay in that 135 to 140,
pretty quick.
You've got to be moving really quick. Yeah. And at the moment, I don't have the ability to maintain that 135 to 140, especially like if I'm running near home and, I've got a 1K hill. It's tarred road, but it's average around between 11 and 13%.
Yeah.
Sort of topping out at 20 and down under 10. But I'd be flat out sprinting to try and maintain that heart rate, like to get the work there. And I just can't.
Something else.
And I just can't. So, but, it's averaging out, but it's certainly a lot better than what I was expecting at sort of say around 120, 125. So I've stayed with that 140. I'm keeping that on, and hopefully I'll reap the benefits.
Yeah. Well, I thought about doing what you said with the math training. I've run out at 6 foot on the track a few times and realised how steep the hills are. And I'm just running hills to try and get used to. My aim is to try and run as much as the hills as I can during the race.
Yeah.
And I'm starting to think whether it's possible, like, to maybe try and see if I can get as close to a sub 5 hour as I can. But I don't know. I don't know.
From my experience, you don't need to run all of the hills.
No.
All of the time to get sub 5.
I don't think I'd be able to run all the hills all the time. I think
I'd be expecting a big kaboom, a big explosion if you did try and run, because really it's just like, I don't even know if, I imagine maybe the top 10 run the whole way.
Yeah.
I would be surprised if even the top 20 run.
Yeah, I think I would do a walk-run strategy up the hills, But for now, it's like running all the hills.
Yeah. So Megalong Mega is really good hit out to try and work out, well, when should I be running and when should I be walking? And like for that the elevation percentage, you get a feel for that.
Yeah. So we are getting a lot of messages around when are we starting the Summit Run Club again. And so obviously not this weekend.
No.
So we're recording this on the 21st of January. But the following weekend is the Megalong
Mega. Yeah.
And we thought that would be the start of our...
Yeah, I mean, it won't just be us. There'll be an awful lot of people turning up for that, as they are every year.
Correct. So we'll just add our numbers to that and go out and have a run with everyone else.
Yeah, I mean, it's an out and back, so it's easy for... Well, it's not easy, but
it's
good for any anticipated distance or time, because you can just head out and then at wherever your designated distance or time is, you turn around and head back. Yeah. Although it'll be slower coming back from the river than most people. If it's their first time, you get caught out. It is hard.
It always catches me out coming back. It's from the river back to the cemetery. It's just always harder than you think it is.
Yeah.
You don't realise the amount of elevation you're going up, and there's quite a few stairs actually. That caught me out last Friday.
Yeah. So, so we'll be posting on the Summit Gear website what we expect over the next month.
We'll try and get
February. We'll try and get the whole lot on there. We've decided through 2025 we'll stick to our ethos of if there's a race in the Blue Mountains, any big events in the Blue Mountains, then we won't have the run club. On that weekend, because we want people to be attending the and supporting the events that people are putting on. So
and I guess what we're going to have to also organise before 6 foot is we were talking. This is for our listeners. We were talking a couple of weeks ago about this theory that I'd heard, which was that your 5K effort is the best predictor of how you're going to go in an ultra distance run, and we want to see if that's actually true, and we want to see if it lines up. So we've got to find time to go do our 5K park run.
Yeah, so we've chosen to do that at Lawson.
We'll do the
Lawson Park Run. Actually, I think we should probably do it next weekend.
Soon.
That Megalong Mega weekend, first weekend in February.
Yeah.
So which will be the weekend. It will be this weekend for everyone listening to this, for when we get this out. So a week after Blue Goat, but the Saturday 5K hit out before we then on the Sunday go and do Megalong Mega. And that'll give us, I think that'll be
either that weekend or the following weekend. Yeah, I think. Anyway, we'll work that out because my experience is when I run a hard 5K, it does take it out of my legs for the Megalong Mega.
Well, but that's good.
Well, probably
Megalong Mega. If you're starting that a bit tired, then that's probably a good thing.
Probably not a bad thing.
As a gauge for how your endurance and your fitness is, and that. So I don't think we should shy away from that. It might be a little bit more pain coming our way, but I think we should push that. Yeah. So if you're doing 6 foot and you'd be interested to know how your 5K time equates to your 6 foot finishing time, then pop on up to Lawson or down to Lawson Parkrun and join the.
We'll see.
We can take notes and take times for people, and then we'll see how you go after 6 foot.
So I guess the idea would be for us to run our hardest 5K that we can at this stage.
Absolutely, yeah.
And come up with a percentage difference of our times, and then see how that translates to 6 foot
in a 45K.
In a 45K ultra.
Yep.
Yeah, great. It'd be interesting how...
and no sandbagging. We've got to go hard.
No.
Like we're pushing for a PB.
Yeah, it's a park run. So, I generally don't know how to run a park run slow.
Okay, that's good. That's good. Then we know that you're not sandbagging.
No, because it'd be interesting to see if that's true. I just thought it was interesting that your 5K is the best predictor of your ultra distance performance. I'm curious to see if that's actually the case. So
we'll know.
We'll get some other people roped in.
We'll know.
Give it a crack.
By mid-March, we'll have either proven that theory or debunked it completely.
That's right.
Yep.
Or just confuse the issue altogether.
We can. That's right. And especially if there's more than just the two of us, and there will be. We've got a couple of other people lined up at least for this trial. Then it might be that we'll just have some outliers. But if everyone else is fairly consistent, so we'll see. As you can see, I'm wearing the 6 foot race shirt. This one is from 2023. So, as we've already been talking about, 6 foot is our big focus for the early part of the year, notwithstanding that there is a Running Wild Wentworth Falls event coming up in a couple of weeks, which is now sold out, which is great news. But I really wanted to pursue a 6 foot focus for the first few episodes in the build up to 6 foot. So we've got 3 episodes coming up. I won't talk about the next 2. We'll be teasing that out in coming weeks. But the very first episode we've got for this year, for 2025, I've interviewed Ben Artup, Mr. Sleep Train himself, who is the former record holder for the 6 foot track and winner. He was quite an athlete and quite an adventurer as well. And it was a real fun
when
interview.
Did he hold the record?
2009 to, I think, 2014.
Yeah, right.
So it wasn't, or maybe it was 2012. It wasn't a real long time. He'd certainly blown away the previous record by, I think, 8.5 minutes or something like that, which is still, for the number of champions that had run and won that race. And still today, my understanding and from checking the records is that Ben's time is still the second fastest ever.
Wow.
During the 6 foot track race. But really great chat. It was great to catch up with an old mate at home. We did it just after Christmas, and some really good stories. So I think people will get a lot out of this interview.
All right. Well, here's the interview with Rob and Ben Artup.
Yep. Well, Ben, welcome to Two Robs and a Mic. Today, I want to talk to you about, I suppose, your trail running career. Right from the start. So I know you were a triathlete as a junior.
Yep.
Was that your, how did you start in sport?
My background is a triathlete. I don't really sort of call myself a runner, more of a triathlete, because that's sort of, as an athlete, that's where I started. But I guess before that, I got into triathlon through swimming. So I was, my parents, when I was young in 10, 11, 12, threw me into swimming to keep me on the straight and narrow. And we'd also, as I grew up, we also bushwalked and camped. So we lived in the Blue Mountains, and our holidays were spent camping in the Gross Valley, Sassafras, the local runs that people do now, camping. And then when I got to an age, my parents got me into swimming for no other reason than we had a swimming pool up the road. So that was the sport that chose me. I did that for several years. I was an average swimmer. As a competitive kid swimming, I was pretty average. And then when I got to high school, triathlon came along. It was in the late 80s, triathlon was a brand new sport. It was the Wild West. It was rock and roll. It was, there was no coaches, systems, anything. And and it came to our school one day, and we were invited to do a teams triathlon. So a couple of my mates got together, and I was a swimmer. So I got out of the water in that race in a Perth triathlon in 1987 when I was in year 7.
So what school were you at?
St. Columbus then.
St. Columbus,
okay. Yeah.
So you've lived your life in the mountains?
My whole
as
life
a junior,
as a junior. And then so I did that swim leg in the triathlon in 1987, and because I was a swimmer, I got out of the water okay. And being competitive, I was looking forward to my bike ride and my running teammate to going on and making sure we won our first triathlon. We didn't win it all. So I spent the next year fuming. There was this triathlon, this great new, exciting new sport for a young kid to see. And I thought, naturally competitive little kid. And so I came back the next year and wanted to do the triathlon by myself and get rid of my mate who was the bike rider and the runner and do it myself. And
because I remember doing the Nepean triathlon as a relay. And so I did the run league around Leonie and River Road. Then no one was doing the whole thing.
Up the top of Sanctuary. And it was
of their own.
It was a new sport. It was a great way to get people into sport. Teams triathlons back then were really, really big because it was a way to enter this brand new sport that was a sort of a bit of a subculture of mainstream sports, of swimming and running, was triathlon. And I remember I used to go to swimming training on Mondays after a triathlon and not tell my coach what I did on the weekend because I thought I might have got in trouble because I was doing this crazy new fringe thing called triathlon. It was like that. So that's how I got into triathlons, And
so the next year you came back, what, year 8?
Yeah, year 8. And it was amazing because in that intervening year, I found my tribe. I was very, very lucky at that age when you're looking for things outside your family and school. I found this group of triathletes, that this new sport that was emerging. And I had the teacher at school at St. Columbus who encouraged us to do it. And she was this, I can't remember her name, but she was the PE teacher. And I think she'd done the Hawaii Ironman. She came to school.
Wow.
And she was a PE teacher, and they had this big thing around Mrs. Quinn, I think her name was, doing the Hawaii Ironman, and she was the one that told us about the Nepean triathlon, and you could never do it alone. You could never do it by yourself. It's so hard, triathlon so hard, you could never do it. And I didn't want to get on with this teacher. It was quite a mutual thing between us. So I did it partly out of spite the following year to try and beat her. And then in 1988, when I did it on the 1st of December, 1988, I can remember it, the day, I did 2 hours and 18 in my first full Nepean triathlon back then as year 8. And I'd spent that whole winter, riding, and I brought a bike because I got a job at the local swimming pool where I was doing swimming training. The lady who owned the pool, Mrs. B, took me under her wing and, gave me free squad training lessons and gave me a job picking up papers. And with that money, I saved up to buy my first bike. So, 6 months, summer job, and then I bought a bike and I was ready for the Nepean triathlon that year. And as soon as, I did my first full-length triathlon and did well against, not just against the teacher that I was trying to beat, but all my friends in the squad, it was great, for a young kid to have, he was naturally competitive, to be in an environment where there was other good people around you, coaches, mentors helping you out. I was just very lucky to find that sport at the right time. And, I don't know what I would have done if I didn't find that competitive outlet and turn into, spending the 90s just doing triathlon.
So you were competing with the Chapmans? There?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at that 90s period of triathlon, everybody that went on to the Olympics, world champion, you name it, was in that cohort of, in the early 90s, late 80s, who went on, and Chris McCormack, Craig Alexander started later on, Craig Walton, Chris Hill, I suppose, all those guys as a junior who went on amazing things, if you know the sport of triathlon. And my idols were Greg Stewart, Brad Bevan, and Miles Stewart. Those guys, they were like the posters I had up in my room when I was a kid, who I idolised to train and beat. But it was just a great time, in that period. I was a junior, and then I moved into the elite ranks in the 90s and raced some ITU races and around the world in bits and pieces. So
where did you travel to for those races?
I went to Cancun. I went to the World Championships in 95 and raced there. And I did the Sydney ITU race in 96, and a lot of other the St. George Triathlon Series around Australia. Yeah. Those races around, so I did some of those races. But yeah, just race nationally, that level.
So what age were you then?
I was from 13 on to about 27, 28 before I sort of stopped racing at a professional level. So I did that whole period through my 20s. And my last race that I raced at a professional level was in 2002, which was the old Foster Ironman back in 02. I went just under 9 hours. But yeah, that was sort of my triathlon career, racing as a junior and then into the elite ranks. But it was just a great time for Australian triathlon. That's when Australian triathlon was at its peak. We won everything in every division at every race. Australia ruled the world, and you look back at this most competitive triathlon scene that you could imagine, and it was just great. It was a great, that was my foundation in endurance sport. How I sort of then later on when I stopped racing full time, I got a job, and then had to balance, work and training. That's when running became, an option, and I realised my forte was probably running. And when I did triathlons, I used to swim. Like you wouldn't believe, 50% of my training was swimming up and down a point. But I wasn't as naturally gifted at swimming as I was in running. I did very little run training, and I'd always, if I was going to win, it'd be, in the run leg. Yeah, just because I had that natural inclination towards running over swimming.
And where, so yeah, okay, so we'll say mid-20s that you were just starting to get into more of the. I mean, were you doing trail running or road running? I mean, obviously triathlon is road running, but were you doing a fair bit of trail running?
Well, it's funny when you say the word trail running. The first time I actually heard that term used as a sport was in 2009 after 6 Foot Track. So I wasn't even aware of the term trail running until 2009 when I entered 6 Foot Track. And that
it was just running.
It was just running. It was just a local fun run. My triathlete mates would go, I used to do a local fun run up at the 6 Foot Track, running with along the trails. And but I grew up in the mountains, and all my triathlon training for running was done on trails. We just didn't call it a sport back then. It was just running out, Gross Road, Chapman Parade, through the bush and the trails that we now run on. So all my formative years of running in triathlon were all done on, predominantly done in trail. So I don't have any pedigree that I can look back in my running world to say I've got, a running pedigree. It's a triathlon pedigree. So when I did my first, my first big race in trail running in 2009 with 6 Foot Track marathon, it was like, who's Ben Artup? Because nobody knew me in the running world. So,
well, you weren't Ben Artup.
No, I wasn't.
You weren't Ben Artup. And I did want to talk about that fact. So you did your first 6 foot in 2007.
I actually did my first one in the year 2000 under somebody else's name.
Right.
Maybe
so we won't talk about that.
We won't talk about that.
How did that other man or woman
in that race, do I race under somebody else's name?
Yeah.
I had a friend who...
Because you'd have been early 20s.
I raced on... I would have been 27, 28.
Oh, okay.
That age. Late.
Yeah.
And I won't mention his name, but he pulled out of the race, and the night before the race, he rang me and said, I'm pulling out. And in those days, you could turn up to the race start, and that's when you got your race number. So I turned up to race start, I found out the night before, and gave the lady at the desk his name and took his race number and started the race. And I got to... That was when Paul Arthur was... I didn't know Paul Arthur, but he raced and won that year, and he caught me as we we're going up mini saddle.
Okay.
So I led until about that stage of the race.
Wow.
And blew up. I hadn't done any real training for it. And I'd actually hurt my ankle as we were running down the first stairs. So I hobbled from the stairs to mini saddle before I stopped and looked at my ankle, and it was blown up, and I pulled out, and Paul Arthur passed me. And he went on to win, obviously. That was when Paul Arthur was going through his winning streak.
Oh, so you didn't finish that race?
I didn't finish, yeah.
Okay.
DNF'd.
Right.
DNF'd in the year it was 2000, 2001, yeah.
Uh-huh. Oh, interesting.
That was my first exposure, but I'd always heard about the race. It was the race that the older guys done. That part of the Blue Mountains running community back then, Blue Mountains joggers.
Yeah, and even back then in the early 2000s, it wasn't a sellout.
No,
and you could. Well, actually, it's funny. I remember talking to Andy Lee about it in the old days. You'd have to send a check. Yeah, with a written form, and you'd have to post it to get in. But you could get in even when they'd sort of gone electronic.
Correct.
You could get in like 2 weeks, before the race. You could go. Yeah, actually, I think I'll do it.
Yeah,
and enter. It's nothing like the lottery and the wait list now. Yeah. So I want to talk about the fact that Ben Artup didn't win 2009. So you raced in 2007.
I raced in 2007.
You raced in 2007 as Sleep Train?
As Sleep Train, yeah. I raced under that pseudonym because that was the era when we had blog pages and we all had fake running names and we were just using them. And I'd seen other people get away with using their pseudonym in race entry lists. So I thought I'll try it. So I just raced under Sleep Train, and they let me. And in '07 was a bit of a disaster. I was training a little bit for marathon at that stage. I'd done a marathon in 2006. I did a bit of a comeback to get fit type marathon, and then '07 I was still running. So I entered 6 foot track. And I just remember running. That was possibly the darkest moment of my sporting career in that race, in terms of the pain and the agony I went through as I was finishing that race, running down towards Cave's house in the last 7 hours. I remember looking inside myself and seeing parts of me as an athlete that just were horrifying in terms of how much pain I was going through. It was the first time I've ever muttered, I never want to run again. It hurt that much, because what hurt was the first hour running downhill. Destroyed my legs. I didn't have that running thing in your legs where runners can handle that type of trauma and downhill running damage. So I got to the river and I was just trashed, and then I couldn't climb. My natural ability to climb up hills, I couldn't access that, and then I just struggled along Black Range, and I was dead by the time I crossed the road, and then was in agony as I got across the line. I just remember, I'm never doing this again. I'm never coming back to this, the 6 foot track. And it was a dark day.
But for us mere mortals who listening to you say that, that it really hurt you, you're in so much pain and agony, you're never going to do it again. What'd you do? It was 3:23, 3:25?
I think I came fourth in 3:36.
3:36 was it? I noticed, because I did a little bit of research, and I was interested to know what position you came, because you were only 2 seconds ahead of Neil Lubinsky.
Yeah, that'd be right.
I
remember that name. Yeah.
And I thought, and I was trying to work out, okay, were you battling for a podium place and you just beat him, getting down that last stretch into Cave's house, or for 2 seconds after 45 kilometres?
I think Joe Blake ran past me with 3 or 4K to go. He got third. He beat me by minutes. I remember him running past me, and I'm going, oh, God. I remember Tony Fattorini passing me going up the top of Pluvy, in that race.
Previous winner too.
Yeah. And I remember Fats going past me thinking, how do people run up a hill and he looks good? I just remember him passing me going, how do you run up a hill, breathing comfortably, moving well, and just in control? And I thought, that's inspired. That inspired me, seeing Fats run past me.
Yeah. Oh, so in that year, did you run all the way up Mini and up Pluvy?
Yes, yeah.
And all the Black Range?
Yeah, I ran the whole thing. I just stumbled. Yeah, I was just it was in pain. But I ran the whole thing. Yeah.
Do you reckon to finish under 4 hours, you pretty much got to run the whole way?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Definitely.
So you didn't go back in '08 because you were done with the race. You were never coming back.
Yep.
But then in '09, Sleep Train returned.
He did.
Entered again.
He did.
And I'm interested to know. So after a 3:30 something, and 3:36 and fourth place, what did you do differently in training?
Yeah, well, in
09?
In '08, I didn't bother, because I thought, I don't know how to run downhill. I don't know how they do that. I thought, what's the point if I can't run downhill and recover? It's not a race. It's just you're dead. What's the point? I don't know how to do that. So what I did in that year was, in '08, I turned to bushwalking. I was spending a lot of time every weekend out looking for rock art in the Wollemi and other things that I was out there searching for. And it was just a big year of bushwalking. And that's my other big passion, bushwalking and getting out into the wilderness, as, I did a lot of this as a child.
So just on that, sorry to interrupt, but so was it your dad and you and Scott doing all this camping? Or was your sister and your mum involved in that too?
No, it was Dad taking 3 boys out.
With
a lot of energy in, camping. As we were young, we did all sorts of bushwalks. We walked down the Gross Valley in 1984 in 5 nights when we had 3 days food, and we got stuck out there and all sorts of great stuff.
And
like
how
that.
old?
10 or 11. 10 or 11. I was 11. And we got Dad said we'll walk down the Gross Valley from Mount Victoria to Falconbridge. Be about 3 days as a trail down there called the Royal Engineers Track, which was on the map. And we got down there, the trails doesn't exist. And it doesn't take 3 days.
It's from what, World War II or something?
Yeah, it was the 1890s.
1890, okay, before World War I.
Surveying the train line up there, and they decided it was a silly spot to build a train line. But that track's not there. We thought it was, and it took us 5 days, and there's helicopters out looking for us. And it was just, a great formative experience as a young boy. And Dad had his cool, and, we didn't have food, and we eventually
got out. Eating?
Just
day 4 and day 5.
Day 4 and 5, we had some Vegemite in it, one of those little sachets you get on when you go into restaurants. We had some of those in rugby, so we just boiled up the remains of Vegemite in our billy with some, with some gum leaves, and that was dinner for the last 2 nights. But it was an incredible experience. But we got out, and that was just normal, like going into the bush and going as long as you can, and having that endurance, that mindset that it'll always be right, and you always get out. You never. Our saying in the family was, "You never lost, you're only ever overdue."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when the helicopters are out, then you're very overdue, right?
And Dad always had these ambitions for some reason. He had this thing, we've got to complete the growth, or we've got to get up Springle Creek. His goal was to find the way up Springle Creek back home or something, because the back of the house ended up there. But he always had this goal and this ambition to do these big completions across wilderness.
Mm-hmm.
And, and that was always a challenge, and that's the way we sort of grew up.
So if you're doing the full gross, so if you start at Mount Vic, do you end up below the escarpment almost in the river? Yeah,
you do. We finished at Yarramundi, at the youth camp there. We started at Victoria Falls at Mount Victoria when we did it years later. When we ran it. But when we did it with Dad, we went in at Blackheath and came through Blue Gum. Yeah.
Right.
And then we got out at Falconbridge back in 1984.
And came up
up to
Falco Point.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
At 10 years old.
10 or 11, I think it was, yeah. But my younger brother was 9.
Mm.
And when we did it, we got up and you just had to, and it was just sort of normal. Yeah.
So have you all got amazing lung capacity?
Yeah. I think my younger brother was the runner, and I think my older brother we used to run as young boys, and we could all run. Yeah, we all had sort of similar capacity, I think. Yeah.
It has to be developed. It's a bit like Killian Jornay's story, where Mum and Dad would say, we're going up these mountains and over this pass, and he's on a little bike, he's just lost his training wheels and he's up on the freeway.
Yeah.
So,
Well, that was it. We just walked everywhere. Holidays were walking in the bush, we never owned a car, so we just walked everywhere. Mm.
And I know you would take your boys out on some overnighters and big walks, and they were like 3 and 4 years old, weren't they?
Yeah, they did. That 1984 walk I did down the Gross, I tried to recreate it with my boys at the same age, a couple of years ago, and we got halfway down the Gross and we had some challenges, and I'm not going to put my boys through that. We're just going to spend 3 or 4 pleasant days. We camped down the Gross and we climbed back up Lockley's Pole and out by Lure.
Okay, so you're down in Acacia.
Amazing time. Amazing time with them. So
how old were they then?
They were the same age. They were 11. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
God, how old are they now?
13.
Wow.
Oh my God. Scary.
Awesome. Yeah. We'll come back to that.
Okay.
We'll come back to that. But I just want to stay on 6 foot. Yeah. So, and one thing, do you recall what shoes you ran in 07 and 09?
Yeah, Kayanos.
Kayanos? Yeah.
Both times, because I'm a heavier runner, and you're on trails, you're not on a road. I trained in them, so they were just comfortable for me. Yeah, I didn't believe in the lighter, thinner shoes, and all the new shoes I sort of have now weren't as prominent.
No, I remember doing my first 4 or 5 6 foots in Kayanos too.
Yeah, they weren't in inverted commas trail running.
There wasn't a trail running shoe, not until Innovate and Salomon.
Correct. Yeah, they came along. Yeah.
First, and then Hoka came out with the Mafate. They only had 2 shoes in Australia. Yeah. There was the Bondi and the Mafate, and I remember I ran in them for a couple of years, and then they sort of disappeared for a while, and then they made a big resurgence. I think in Australian running, it was the Coast to Cosy that really got the Hokas back. Yeah. But it's interesting, and now people will still say 6 foot is a road run because it's not super technical. It's just Nellie's Glen, and then you're on Fire Trail
the whole way. Yeah.
Most of the way. I mean, you got that sort of from Pinnacle Hill down to the river.
Yeah.
It's single track, but there's a lot of guys, but certainly hitting the podium in traditional road shoes, really light, trainers and stuff.
Yeah.
So you went down to Sleep Train again, and do you know is the Perpetual Trophy does actually have Sleep Train? I'm sure it does. Did have Sleep Train, didn't it?
I don't know. I know the race entry and the race results still have Sleep Train in it. Well, they did when they came out. Yeah. But I just entered that. And so when I finished the race, nobody knew who I was.
No.
I finished and they go, sleep train, we know that's not his real name. We're going to find out who it really is. And then when they found out the name, they still didn't know Ben Artup. No runner knew Ben Artup because it was a triathlete, so it didn't help.
So where did sleep train the pseudonym come
I
from?
had a friend, Brendan Lachetti, who wrote an article once about a triathlon I did once, and he was talking me up, and he sort of made the name up. He said all he does is sleep and train, as in preparation for this race, known as sleep train by his friends, which he just made up, and it was funny, and it stuck. Middle name Eat, so sleep, eat, train.
Sleep, eat, train.
And I just thought it was funny, and it sort of stuck, so I just used it when people were coming up with running names. I just used sleep train, but I sort of only entered.
Were you on Cool Running?
I wasn't. No, I was never on Cool Runnings. Never got on Cool Runnings. Okay. Too much for me. But when I entered,
but you had your own blog
for a while. Yeah.
Yep.
I looked at
that was a thing.
It was terrible. I looked at it recently. It's terrible. I hope nobody ever finds that one.
It's funny because of that. How we've sort of gone through phases through the generations. I heard recently someone was talking about Anton Kaprishka's. His blog
was
his running blog, and I can't remember who it was. Someone was saying that they still listen to to some music based on what Anton was listening, and used to quote on his blog. So there were some people that were doing it well, but that sort of disappeared, didn't it?
It did, we just post things in real time now. As you do the run, you go straight up on social media or whatever. You want to share it.
Well, even that. Actually, I will talk about that. So remember the early years of the Blue Mountains Marathon Clinic?
I do.
Where we used to all text each other.
Yeah.
And we really only had one or two runs. One was from your place.
Yep.
Which
Tuesday.
is now still known as the Sleep Train Loop.
Circuit. Yeah.
Sleep Train Loop. And we used to just text each other, and it would be like, we're all on like these 6 cents and 10 cent text plans.
Yeah.
And then, so I think it was Barrow who said, we need to get on this thing called Facebook because it's free and it won't cost us money to send text.
It was a money
every month because it wouldn't be one person would post would send a text to like a dozen. Well, actually, there wasn't even a dozen people then. Yeah. So who was it? There was you, Barrow, Dr. Phil, Jeff Price,
Coburn, yes,
Jason Rakowski,
that was it.
And then I joined up, and
the new fella,
that was 07.
Yeah, it was around that period.
Yeah, so it was generally like only 4 or 5 people.
Yep. Yeah.
Can you believe there's what
it's become?
2,200, 2,300 people.
And it's credit to
on
Ben,
the Facebook
Ben
page.
who's grown that community. I mean, him and I were together when we coined the term, made the name up. It was a bit of a joke, and it was a bit of a play on words or.
To get the thing into the Gazette.
It was the Sydney Marathon Club.
That's right.
We read that, and that was like we were new to the running area, and we started looking into this group called the Sydney Marathon Club. We thought, what a silly name, and they actually post their results in the local newspaper. And we thought, why don't we post our results just a little bit faster than their results, and we'll call ourselves the Blue Mountains Marathon Clinic as a joke. And we just laughed our guts out, and then we thought, actually, that sounds pretty good. That's a good name, and so it stuck. And then Jeffrey Price and got some shirts and a logo made, and Ben Berman had the web page, and then later the Facebook group, and it just stuck from there. And it became a thing, and it was really just
huge
of runs that evolved and the community behind it. And it's incredible. Credit to what Ben's done driving that community.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know we started to talk about it, but I really want to hone in on this because I think people would be interested to know what people used to do for training compared to what people are doing now with all these. I mean, because coaches weren't a thing back then. No. You had little A's coaches, but they were really just parents.
Yeah,
generally just volunteers.
Got roped in,
It wasn't like proper coaches. I know it's probably was starting to get some proper coaches in the triathlon space. Before Spot Anderson and people like that sort of took it to the next level. But again, they were either swim coaches or
run coaches,
just
adapting it.
But so you would have been self-coached then?
I had swimming coaches and I had occasional triathlon coaches, but there was no rules and self-coach. A lot of the time I'd spent time with Spot Anderson on the Gold Coast for a year training up there. They had swim coaches that were sort of aware of what I was doing in triathlon and coached me a little bit into the triathlon area. But then lots of the people that I started training with had been on training camps part of training teams, and came back to the area, and we trained together. So we did it ourselves a little bit. And we were following different systems in triathlon that were emerging. So there was different groups of people that were training different styles. So we were sort of doing a bit from different group, camps of training based on different coaches. But looking back, that was like in the 90s. It was all very new. It was new. I mean, Australia got results, because of the way they trained so hard. We trained so hard. You wouldn't believe how much training we used to do as a triathlete. It was all volume based. But looking back, you could have done a lot better, more effective training. And later, when I did go to running around that 09 6-foot track period, I don't call him a coach, I call him a running advisor that I just happened to connect with, who trained all my programming for 6-foot and later the marathons after that. Nathan Johnson, who's an exercise physiologist from Sydney University. He was a triathlete, but he's more of a scientist than a coach. And he loved triathlon, and he was aware of the training that I was doing and stuff like that, but he just changed the way that I would train and think about my body and performance and improvement through a more scientific approach, which he'd explained to me how things worked and why you would do things to get the adaptation you required. And then he'd listen. He'd say, well, how are you feeling? What are you doing? How do you normally train? He'd listen to it. Then he'd tell you how to change it and adapt it to get results and how it's going to work. So for me, it was the why that connected with me as an athlete at how I was applying the training each day, which made a big difference.
So, but was all of your training running?
No.
Under Nathan, were you doing?
I was doing all
strength
three.
work. You're doing mobility work, and
I was doing swim riding and running.
Okay, so you're still training like a triathlete.
Yeah, I believed as an athlete back then, rightly or wrong, that I couldn't get fit enough to be good as a runner by just doing running, because I didn't have the running years, I didn't have the running engine in or the legs, and to get fit, I just needed to be doing, most of my training was running, and then I'd do three bike rides and say 3 or 4 swims a week in addition to the running. So it was a lot of volume, but I just needed to do volume. I was that type of an athlete. But the hard stuff, all the heart rate stuff, was done running. And then the swimming and the bike riding were done at tempo or recovery.
So I know that one of your key, or I believe from previous discussions years ago, one of your key sessions was doing that sleep train loop
circuit,
3 times. Over, like you do it in the morning.
Oh, yeah.
And then come back and then do it again and then come back and do it again.
As I was building up to a race, so 6 weeks out, instead of doing the big long run on a Sunday, which, can tire you out in certain ways, and you want to be doing quality running as you're leading up to a race and getting your body used to running at race pace. What Nathan had programmed was on the Sunday leading up, you do 4 runs. So it was 4 50-minute runs. So you do, pace them out during the day, do one early, do one late, 2 in the middle of the day. So you'd warm up for 20 minutes, and then you'd do 20 minutes at above race pace, effort, and then you do 20 minutes warm down, so 50, 60-minute type running 4 times. So that
was like a 10K circuit.
Yeah, you get 10 or so K done. So at the end of the day, you're doing 40 plus K, but you're doing 80 minutes above race pace. So you're just dialing into that, but you're getting the recovery, the warm-up, and the rest and recovery between each of the sessions. And that's your big day. There's a lot of volume and there's a lot of intensity, and you don't start at 4 runs. You might start 6 weeks out at 2 runs and then 3 runs and then eventually get to the 4 runs as you build up the volume. But that was that was one of those things Nathan said, this is a better way to train your body, and explain why. And so I just did it, and it worked.
Awesome. Well, it clearly worked because you set a new 6-foot record that had been, do you know how many years?
Yeah, it was something like 17 years. I think that one. Fatarini had taken a few seconds off a couple of years before, and somebody else had done it like incremental. It was 3:23, and I'd done a few seconds around that 3:23 mark, and then I went 3:15, which was
So you took nearly 8 minutes off the record, which was a massive jump from those little increments of 20 seconds, 10 seconds. And that time did eventually get beaten by Stu Gibson. So people that follow Blue Mountains trail running will know that Stu Gibson had won the North Face 100 twice. Once side by side with Andy Lee, and then in his own right the next year, I think. an amazing runner himself too. So, certainly not a fluke to take the record. But even now in 2024, and I'm wearing the 09 shirt, the 6 foot shirt, in honour of that record, of that win by Sleek Train. That's still, as far as I could tell, the second fastest time ever on the course. So, so certainly no other wins have been faster other than Stu's.
Correct.
So, so it's still, that still holds as a podium time. Ever. So amazing. So after that, so you did say obviously when you're running triathlon and doing Ironman, you're doing a marathon distance.
Yes. Yeah.
So prior to your 09 6 foot, how many marathons had you run?
I'd done 5 or 6, I think, roughly.
And what sort of times were you doing those?
My debut marathon in 1998, just when I finished triathlon, was we had a break in triathlon. It was 2:36 or 2:36, I think it was, or 2:38. It was just a little race in Sydney somewhere. It was a Shimoy race. So I just did that. So that was my best before that.
Would have been out at Bankstown?
Not Scarborough. Down Cronulla way. Yeah.
Okay.
Somewhere down in Sandringham or around there. Yeah, it was a one-off race. Just there was only 40 people in the race, but it was a timed event. But yeah, I just entered that, and I did that off the back of Triathlon Fitness. I know, real marathon.
So you would have won that, sure.
Yeah.
2:30 something. Yeah.
But the 09 race, the reason I entered 6 foot track in 2009 wasn't to race or win or perform. It was actually just to get fit enough to traverse across the Wollemi.
So so come on, being fair dinkum, did you have a plan to beat the record?
Once I started training on the 3rd of January 2009, I caught up with Nathan and I said, I'm entering this race in 8 weeks' time, or whatever it was. And that's when he got me on the program of what I was talking about, the race pace efforts and things like that. So once I got going with that program, eating properly, training properly, I started building, just getting into it. I was getting fitter, faster and leaner, and I was feeling good. My volume was building up. And then I put a goal on my phone, on my screensaver of my phone back then. I said, sub 320 6 foot track. It's a visual reminder.
Well, that's a record.
It's a sub 320. And that was pretty crazy because the record was 323. And I put on my screensaver because I was, training twice a day and doing everything properly as an athlete, falling back into the old habits. And then I put that on my screen, in my phone to look at. So every time I looked at my phone, which is 300 times a day for work, I'd see that. So it just went in. That's just that picture and that goal went into my head, and things just adjusted to that goal. Everything adjusted to run that schedule. So I started, training more seriously, and so I turned up on the race start that year after just doing an incredible string together, an incredible, probably about 9 weeks of training. That was really, really good. So I turned up pretty confident that I'd run really, really well, and I did. But the year before that was spent bushwalking. So that what really gave me the strength in 2009 was just the year of being out in the bush, walking every weekend, doing
heavy pack.
Heavy pack. I did some 8-day walks out in the Wollemi. I did, sometimes weekends I do 2 full days, or 10 hours each day with a pack on, trudging through wilderness and over terrain. A lot of time by myself, just doing these massive big walks, which were exhausting. I'd do sometimes. I'd walk for 10 or 12 hours in the bush to get to somewhere to check something out. And I think that's the effort of an Ironman. And then you'd camp out there and have to walk out the next day. And it was just by myself. So they were exhausting mentally and physical days, but it was just building quad strength and, getting my system back in place. And there wasn't a lot of running that year. It was a lot of,
so not a lot of, racing. Not a lot of damage.
Not a lot of damage. And I think I did one race somewhere, but there was no racing in 08. It was just all walking. Bushwalking, and then it sort of around the Christmas time I started doing long runs, and I started on the 3rd of January seriously with the goal of the race coming up in 09.
So there you go. We don't need carbon-plated super shoes. We need heavy boots.
Heavy boots and a pack and just volume. Just
canvas pack.
It's time on the legs, and it was just canvas pack out there in the bush, just sweating, hurting,
Yeah. But then you did stay pursuing marathon.
I did.
I remember the M7 marathon.
Yeah.
So, but that was something you trained.
I did.
For.
Yeah. So I finished.
So what year was that?
That was 09. That was like 16 weeks after 6 foot track. So I finished 6 foot track and thinking, right, I've fulfilled the goal of getting fit to traverse the Wollemi in April 09. So the goal was to walk across the Wollemi from north to south solo in April 2009. So I entered 6 foot track on the 2nd of January 09, entered the race to get fit, got fit, won the race.
Which is early March.
Yep.
So then you were going to go, what,
April,
6 weeks later?
A month later. So I do the marathon, I do the 6 foot track and finish that. And then I go traverse the Wollemi. So the week after 6 foot track, I went and did the food drop in the Wollemi and caged the food in the middle of the Wollemi. So I'd get my food halfway through the traverse. And so I did the food drop, and then about 2 weeks later, I thought, well, you know what, I'm running really well. I did 3:15 at 6 foot track. I've always wanted to do a really good road marathon, see what I could do. So after I did the food drop, I canned the traverse. I said, let's just just focus on running for another 12, 16 weeks and see what I can run, what I can run a road marathon in. And
did you go back and get your food?
Well, I went back 4 years later and it had almost disappeared. Yeah, I left it out there, and I went back later on a canyoning trip, and we pulled it up, and there was nothing left 4 years later. Wow. Yeah, it's a hell of a place to get to find the food drop. So I just stuck with running for that period and did the M7.
So Nathan was still advising you?
He was, yeah. So I said I'm going to do another race, Nathan. I'm going to put the Traverse off till next year. And let's just do a marathon, see what we can do. Can you help me out with that? And he did, yeah.
And there was the M7.
M7 2000.
Which is not the easiest, flattest.
Yeah, it's got a little bit of incline in it in the first stage, which I suits me. I find that comfortable.
Because did they have the M7 bike path?
Yes, yeah. It
was all the bike path.
Yeah.
I remember that. You go out to near the Macca's at Preston's.
Yeah.
And then finish. You went out past...
Up to Quakers Hill.
Yeah, up to Quakers Hill and then back and then finish in
Park.
Yeah. So, how did you go with that?
That was good. That's my fastest marathon to date, 2 hours 23. And one of the things that actually motivated me to do that was on the Cool Running site. And somebody, after the 6 foot track, somebody said, and this is the way I get motivated sometimes, and people like that, I won't name it, they said, he's a good trail runner, but he couldn't run a marathon. And I thought, that's all I needed to hear. That was just like pure motivation.
His name didn't start with C, did it?
Pardon?
His name didn't start
with
C.
Yes, it did. He's a lovely bloke, and there's nothing yet. But his comment inspired me, and I thought, bugger that. I can run I'll show them what I can do in a road marathon. And halfway through the marathon, when I was doing that race, he was standing on the side of the course, and I thought, great, here we go. This is it was great. So that just inspired.
And you'll say, I knew I would get I would get that extra ounce out of me.
And he's one of my greatest supporters anyway, so it was just one of those things that just get you and you use in a positive way.
And you were the first white man.
I was, yeah, almost.
So you were with were they Kenyans?
There was a bunch of Kenyans that came out. I think it was Julius Maritim who won it, and there was 3 of them that got away in the first half because I'm not the quickest starter. And then I was running them down the end. So there's 3 or 4, Kenyans, and I was running them all down. And almost, if the race had been another kilometre, I would have got Julius. He was dying in the end of that race, and I could see him coming back to me pretty quickly. And then the finish line came.
So he finished second, and you finished first?
He finished first, and I was second.
Oh, you came second? Oh,
yeah,
sorry.
I almost got
I'm downplaying your... For all these years, I thought you came third, and there were 2 Kenyans in front of you.
There was one.
Second.
One more kilometre, and he was dead. He was gone. He was going nowhere, and I was finishing strong.
See, because you've been training for a 45K.
Yeah, I've been, that strength endurance running where you come home stronger, all that strength stuff that I've done in 6 foot of strength race, it suited the back end of a road marathon. So I proved that I could, and I'm happy with that time. Yeah.
That would have been up there at the time. I know we've had some better marathoners in more recent years, but at the time, we're talking 09, that would have been...
it would have been...
Like for Australians,
just behind,
like a B qualifier?
Commonwealth Games B qualifier, something like that. And maybe if I'd improved a bit more or had some more years running, background, I could have gone a bit faster. But it was...
was that a thought?
Yeah, it was at the time, yeah. I thought, I knew I could go a bit faster, a bit more training and stuff like that. I didn't really have that running background, so to speak, so... What could I do if I just spend a bit more time doing it?
Did you have approaches from people saying, I'd love to coach you, I reckon I could get you to the Commonwealth Games? Or?
Nah, not really. I would have just stuck with Nathan. He was just someone I totally clicked with in terms of communication and advising on training. But I went after that. Went to the World Mountain Running Championships in Austria, and I qualified
That's
for
right.
that. So I did that in October. So that was a year I did 3 good marathons.
Did you run that race with the Mount Franklin?
I did, yeah.
600 mil
I
bottle,
did.
yeah.
Same thing I carried me to that everywhere. I did.
Because you did that for 6 foot too, didn't you?
6 foot track. I was on the start line, and Nathan said to me, he goes, "This is what you get: have your gels, just a gel every 30 minutes, and then make sure you wash it down with water. Don't worry about the aid stations, just carry your bottle with you." So we stopped at the servo on the way up, the Lawson servo, bought a bottle of water. He said, "Carry this with you." And I said, "You want me to carry a bottle of water the whole way?" He goes, "Just carry it. Don't worry. Just, so you can get the water, get the gel in at the right time, so you don't have any dark patches. Get your blood sugar as constant as you can, so you don't, have any rough patches." And so I just did what he said. And I carried it up until the last 5K when I had my last sip, and I threw it. He was on the side of the road. I threw it at him and went to the finish because I was just finishing then. So, but yeah, I carried a drink bottle in my hand, a plastic bottle the whole way, and it was good.
Back in 09, would have just been goo, wouldn't it?
Yeah, they were gels, yeah. They were like little,
gels, like
whatever they were, whatever the
about.
brand was, yeah. They were, but yeah, that's.
But one every 30 minutes.
One every 30 minutes. Set it on my clock, time on my watch. It went off every 30 minutes when the alarm went off. I just carried them, I squirted it in, washed it down, and every second aid station I just filled the bottle up with water, so I was running through and carried it with me, and it worked brilliantly, And it sort of, because I was training with one, it just kept me, it felt familiar. I didn't feel uncomfortable. And it was just, it helped me sort of psychologically maintain a training type tempo, but, up a notch for race day. So it was just familiar.
And so you did the same when you went to the World?
Yeah, I just carried on as well. Yeah, just.
So what was the distance of that race?
That was 45, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, it was long distance, 45 in Austria.
And how'd you go there? I mean, obviously
I was doing really well up until the last 3. The last 3K was straight up the side of this mountain called Solhove or something. It was up a ski slope essentially in summer, and I think I was in 3rd or 4th position to the 3K to go, and then that last hill just killed me. Went up to altitude and I suffered a little bit. I ended up, I think 12th or 14th, one of those, so just out of the top 10, which was, it was a bit disappointing, but it was still a reasonable finish for that.
Yeah, and we don't. Yeah, obviously we don't have the altitude and the climbs that the Europeans get exposed to every week.
Yeah, and Mark Lauderstein won that race that year, a Swiss guy, and there was a couple other, with the trail running people in that race as well. That were really good. So a couple of Olympians, but it was a good run. I was quite happy with it. And it was just a good year. That year was a good year, running 3 good races. And I sort of thought by the end of the year I'd done enough in terms of my body being able to recover and train. So needed a race, and I didn't get back to doing the Traverse that year. Yeah.
But you never let that dream die, and you did go back and do the Wollemi Traverse, and you not only won Traverse, but you've done the
fastest, FKT.
So you've done the FKT of the North-South, which you took 3.5 days off that record.
Yep.
And that record had sat for
since
what?
2012.
Okay,
Yuri and his friend did it, in 2012.
So like 12 years?
Yeah, 12 years. There's not many people that have attempted it. There's only a handful that I know of that have attempted it and completed it. There's only 2 confirmed completed traverses and 1 that I've heard of. Well, 2 that I've heard of, 2 that I've confirmed. So there's 4.
There's one of those, the person, we won't mention his name, but
no,
to claim a lot of things.
No, he doesn't. He's not counted in that at all. He's not counted at all. We haven't left Peter Tressida out of it.
I wasn't going to say that, but you're welcome.
Pure, no, he's not one of them.
All right, okay, yeah. But so well done on that, and you and Steve, and so so that took you 13.5 days?
14.5.
14.5, that's right, it was 18.
14.5,
So 3.5 days faster. And then how many months later
The following year, we finished the West to East.
Which is this year?
Yeah. This year, a couple months ago, we just finished it, And
so that was last October.
This September.
September 2023.
Both in September. One was in September 23 and the other one was September 24. They're all done within a year and a day. They're all done within 1 year and 1 day of each other. So they're all pretty tight in September walks, And they they were things when I was doing a lot of that walking pre-6 foot track in '09 and all those, exploring the. I heard stories, I call them fables and myths of people walking across the Wollemi. When you realise how big that national park is, walking across it is, it's crazy. Like it is a huge. As the crow flies from top to bottom, it's 128 kilometres. But to traverse it, it's like it's more than double that, on foot to get across it. There's no trails, no track. It's all wilderness.
And you had to keep going from ridge lines down to get water and then climb back up. And
it's all up and down. You're trying to hold the ridges because it's faster way of travel. Then you've got water, so you've got to drop down to get water. So it's a trade-off between speed and survival, essentially, to find your water. And how much water you can carry and stay high before you drop down again. So,
and you got ripped to shreds too, didn't you?
We got torn to pieces. It was brutal. It was brutal. The first year when we did the north to south in 14 and a half days, me and Steve, in the first couple of days, Steve showed me, he's just a bigger, heavier guy than me. His shirt arms got ripped to pieces in the scrub, and all the vines, so he lost his shirt and we had to solve that problem. The equipment got ripped to shreds. I had a great summit gear pack that
we've still got that
it's
in
all
the factory.
Great pack, and it was I think it was one of the early models, and
it
got pushed to the limit. 14 days of just scrub bashing and being ripped apart. And it was an incredible piece of equipment, and but all the equipment just got ripped to shreds. Now the boots were worn once; they were brand new boots, brand new Scarpas, worn once, never worn again. They're just they're the type of boots you can get.
So trashed.
And like literally a month after the walk, I was still pulling splinters out of my body, my knees and my hands. Still had splinters like more than a month after. They're just coming out of your body, and the fatigue comes out. Your legs are just. I lost 6 kilos out there in those 14 days, but it's just hard. Like every day was 10 to 11 hours of just climbing and walking with a pack on and navigating. You walk as hard as you can, and then just stop and sleep wherever you are before it gets dark, and up the next morning just keep moving south. But it was just the most amazing 14 days I could ever imagine. Out there.
And then you went back in a year later to do the West East.
Yeah. And the record for that was 12 days, done by Yuri Bolton and
again.
So they've written books on their two walks, north to south, east to west, and west to east. And so I just sort of followed. They wrote those books. I just followed their route more or less. They set the beginning and the end and the parameters around the traverses. So more or less, 80% of the route we followed was their route that they published. And I've spoken to Yuri, he's an amazing bushwalker, and if it hadn't been for their detailed planning, and they do the nth degree of planning their walks, we just sort of walked through and went faster essentially.
So what did it take you to do the West East?
That took us 8 days. 8 days, yeah. And the record was, it took us 9 days. Correction. The record was 12, yeah. But going west to east is a lot harder. Like it's shorter in terms of days, but you've got the bigger mountains in the north where you go from west to east. You climb Corriedale and Mollendilla, which are monsters, and you climb both those biggest peaks within the same 24 hours.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going from 1,300 metres, dropping down to Blackwater Creek at 300 metres and climbing back up to Mollendilla at 1,100. And there's
no track.
No trail, nothing. Yeah. And climbing from Blackwater up to Mollendilla, it's 2.1 kilometres as the crow flies, and it took us 5.5 hours. It was just, it's all up. But it's not only is it up, it's actually the undergrowth last year in the Wollemi after the fires 4 years ago, which had taken out all the canopy. When there's no canopy, undergrowth just grows unabated. And then we had a year of rain, which made it even thicker. So it was like peak undergrowth for the Wollemi this September. And it was just horrendous. It was just the most brutal thing I've ever been through in terms of a bushwalk going from the west to the east. But whereas north to south was longer, west to east was definitely tougher.
The whipper pack held up better this time.
Definitely, yeah. They went back to they redesigned the summit gear pack, and I think you made it thicker material, and you changed some of the anchors, and the pack was brilliant. It was light. It weighs 900 something grams, and every piece of equipment was weighed and measured 3 times, and we just took the bare minimum, and that pack just held up brilliantly to get through it.
What was the most water you carried at any one time?
Between us, we had 21 litres at one stage.
Wow.
So we had, I think, 10 and 11 litres when we climbed out of Whidden Valley up onto the Baker Ridge. That should go past Mallow Mountain on the east to west traverse. And we climbed from we climbed with the maximum water capacity up the side of this gully off Whitten Brook on the eastern side of Whitten Brook, if you know the area, up this piece of rock called the Wombat. And it's the biggest piece of sandstone in the whole Greater Blue Mountains World Heritage Area. It's a 300-metre rock piece of rock that we climb up a gully beside it with the 21 litres of water, and up this little choke that was just all scrub. It was all choked with branches, leaves, and we just had to climb up this 300-metre elevation with the maximum water capacity to get up onto this ridge that would move us east called Baker Ridge and Marinackle Ridge. You've got the maps out.
And that was really because you didn't want to run out of water like you had the previous year.
Correct, yeah. The previous years we'd had the first 5 days we'd struggled with water in the north, in the far north, before we got to the Hunter Main. And there was just, you're on this ridge that sort of runs parallel to the Whitten Valley, and where when Yuri had done it a decade earlier, and I knew where he'd gone down to find water, and so I was relying upon his water locations. But when we did it last year, it was a dry period. He went in a wet period, so there was water in his locations. So when I went down to where he found water, there was just dry creek beds, and we were trying to find, water drips and hanging swamps high up before we got down lower at the creeks. But all the drips and the hanging swamps were dry. We got down to the creek beds and they were dry. So what we had to do several times is just go up little re-entrance or gullies where there'd been a soak from months and months or a year ago, where there was just some brown, murky, puddled water. And our first piece of water we found after 36 hours was just this soaking piece of, puddle high up somewhere under this, shady rock ledge that had, bugs through it and leaves and tannins. It was just brown murk, and we just cleaned it. And that was our water. That was the first water we found. And every day was like that, for the first 5 days before we got to the Hunter Main, where the ridges and the creeks become bigger and there's perennial water. But it was a struggle, but we got through it.
Awesome. Well, I won't ask you what your next FKT is going to be, but I do know that somewhere along the way, in recent years, you've sort of taken up CrossFit in a big way.
Yeah.
And getting back into the running, and I know you started doing this new craze called High Rocks.
Yeah.
Which is sort of like a running meets CrossFit.
It is.
As a well, it's not really obstacles. It's CrossFit activities with runs in between each time, isn't it?
And it's High Rocks reminds me of triathlons back in the 80s. Like, it's a brand new sport. It's a subculture in a way. It's of mainstream sports of CrossFit and lifting and running. And nobody knows how to train for it. There's no coaches yet, or there are, but they're
and there's people doing it as teams.
There's people, and it starts as teams, so everybody gets into that sport like they did triathlons in the 80s, to the team thing, and then get into the real sport. And I saw it in March this year. I was just, looking through stuff, and this sport called High Rocks came up. I thought, what's this? And I Googled it, looked at it, and I thought, oh my God, this is exciting. It's like, and I got that buzz that I had when I found triathlons as a kid. It's like a sport that's got, you don't have to be great at any one of them, but you can do all three of the sports, or all these different movements. It suits me perfectly because it's 50% running, and the other 50% are CrossFit movements. And 6 or 7 years ago, when I got older, I thought I'll do some resistant work. I was always going to do resistance when I got older for, the health reasons. And I started CrossFit. So I've been doing CrossFit, casually for 6 or 7 years. And then High Rocks came along, which has got running and CrossFit movements, but really simple, basic CrossFit movements, not the complicated bar work and some of the more gymnastic movements. So I thought, this is perfect. So I ended on the spot. I thought, this is great. And and I did my first High Rocks event in Brisbane in August. Yeah. So
and I don't know if you saw, but Mr. G,
I
Sean
saw,
went down and did in Melbourne. He's getting back into it too.
I did. I've been talking to him.
Maybe he'll shed a couple more kilos and he'll toe the line at 6 foot again.
Ooh, that'd be great.
That would be good. Another trail running Blue Mountains legend of trail running in 6 foot.
Totally.
Sean Greenhill. So.
Yeah, he's tried it out, I think, and enjoyed it. So, yeah.
I also noticed that you've gone back to, or maybe you never stopped, running shirtless, wearing the black shorts. Do you know, I wonder, because, this is how I can tell when the run crew guys running through the national park.
Yeah.
You'll see
all these shirtless guys with black shorts, and I'm like, I wonder if they took that from sleep training.
Yeah, I just always found as a triathlete, I grew up around a swimming pool in Speedos, so I just grew up in Speedos, and people these days think Speedos are odd, but that's the only locker we had back in the 80s. There was none of this fancy race locker these days, and so running, topless and shirtless is just comfortable, especially when it's hot in summer in the mountains. It's just a cruisy way to do it, and so it's something I've always enjoyed, running like that, and it's just a lot more comfortable, I think. Yeah.
Especially up in Bundaberg, where you are now.
Yeah, where I'm now, you got the humidity, the added humidity, and I've got a group up there that I run with, the CrossFitters, High Rocks athletes who have never run before, and I'm enjoying just running with them on Sundays, and we started a group of runners that run together, and it's I'm finding...
And that's along the beach.
Yeah, we just run along the coast,
shore,
yeah. Yeah,
so quite different to running...
it's
sort of Springwood, Falcon Bridge,
dead flat,
up Hazelbrook or whatever. So,
correct, yeah.
Very different running.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I think I'll let you go.
No
I think
worries.
we've covered a whole lot
Yeah,
there.
we have got through a lot, haven't we?
Yeah, thank you very much.
No.
It's been awesome.
Yeah. Thank you for the time and opportunity to share my story, and hope everybody enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm. All right, thanks, Ben.
Cheers. Thanks, Rob.